Hi there, folks. Sorry about that. Some technical difficulties there, but we will be certain to send you that video with a follow-up link so that you can view it. So we're going to move on with our talk here today with Jeff Frey, and he had somebody that joined him while we were trying to figure out the video there.
Yeah, my lovely wife, Sue, joined me, and it's nice to know that we're not the only ones who have computer problems with links. Sometimes Sue and I feel a little outdated when it comes to the computer. So, but welcome everybody, and it's very nice to have you folks out today, part of the Farmland Trust, and we'd like to show you a little bit how harvest is done here. I concentrate on the corn, the soybeans, the wheat, and the barley, and Sue takes care of the flowers here. Do you just want to mention what you do here, Sue, with the flowers?
In the off season, which is in the spring, we grow tulips, cut tulips, and Easter flowers. And then here in the fall is when we plant them. So in another 3 weeks, I'll be busy planting the bulbs for spring.
But it's a busy time of the year all around.
Yes, it is. Yep.
So tell us a little bit about the farm, size of it, how long you've managed the farm, how long it's been in your family. Just give us an overview of your operation.
Okay, well, we bought the farm back in '87. My parents had rented the farm previously to that, and so I feel like it's been in the family longer than that because I grew up here, and so we're farming like 800 acres of corn, soybeans, wheat, and barley, and we had the privilege of preserving this farm back in the early '90s, and so it's nice to live on a preserved farm. It's also a historic farm. It was the Beams homestead, and the oldest chapel in Lancaster County of the Methodist Church is located right at the top of our farm. And we've been no-tilling ever since the '80s. We started no-tilling early because we saw how the soil was eroding, and so we've been at the forefront of that. I'm a member of the No-Till Alliance, Pennsylvania No-Till Alliance, so we try to promote those practices.
That's great. And I should probably also mention that, not only has Jeff and Sue preserved their farm here, Jeff also serves as the chairman of the Ag Preserve Board and has been on the Ag Preserve Board for decades, probably.
For decades, and previously to that, I was on the Farmland Trust
That's
Board,
right.
And so it's an honor to serve in that movement.
Well, we certainly like to have farmers on our board. You keep us in line. You keep us in line. So let's talk more specifically about corn.
Right.
Yep. That's what you're harvesting right now.
That's what we're harvesting right now, and I can sort of walk you through the process. If we go in my little office here, I can show you how we determine which fields to go to.
That sounds great.
So if we head on in there. So what we'll do is we'll pick a couple ears from a couple different fields. And Sue, do you want to help shell some out? You want to help shell some out here? Just pick the kernels off. We have to hand shell the kernels in order to be able to run it through our tester. And that'll determine the moisture level, because we don't want to harvest too wet, because we have to dry the corn. It gets dried to 15.5% moisture is the moisture that they allow us at the mills when we take it. And this is all cattle feed. None of this is for human consumption. So none of this corn is like the sweet corn that you would normally used to eating. It's all grown specifically for the cattle. I did forget to mention I have 2 pig barns here that we finish out pigs for Country View, and of course they eat a lot of this. They eat a lot of corn also. We're going to take it and put it in this machine here. This is our moisture tester. and it'll process it in a couple of seconds here and tell us what the moisture is. Okay, that moisture is 25.6%. In a normal year, we would wait a couple of days or a week to harvest this corn because 25.5% moisture is high, but the moisture generally is running higher this year, and I think it's because of the dry weather that we had in July. Everybody remembers how hot it was, day after day of 90-degree weather. We don't like that weather. The corn plant doesn't like that weather, and so it sort of shut down and protected itself. And then when we started getting rains in August, the corn started growing and retained all this moisture, and so it delayed the plant development. And so that's why the moisture is running higher than normal. So we're harvesting corn around 25%. We would like it to be more around 20, so it wouldn't take as much propane to dry, but we're drying. That's what we're doing in order to get the crop off and to get the next crop in, because we're going to plant wheat after some of the corn that we're taking off. So that's what we do in here to check the moisture. Do you have any questions, Jeff?
Well, just Jeff, what other factors would impact, the health of corn? You talked about the dry weather and how that stresses the plant. Then we had some considerable rain, in the fall here. How does that impact?
Well, the continuous rain, if these kernels here look very nice and healthy and yellow. There are some kernels that we will see some mold here. Sue has some in her hand. You see how some of those kernels are a little darker, and that is from the excess moisture. All the rain we had, the husk sort of retains that moisture, and it can cause mold and discoloration of the kernels. Most of that mold gets blown out of the dryer. The heat sort of mitigates the mold and takes care of it, but that also adds to the challenge of drying. And so, yeah, and the different varieties make a difference.
Every year's different.
Every you can count on that. Every year is different. Last year at this time, we were probably in the middle of harvest, and the corn was running 19 to 20%. Instead of here, we're just at the beginning of harvest, and the moisture is running high. So you are absolutely correct. Every year is different. That's what makes it a challenge. It's also what makes it fun, because no 2 years is the same.
So, how about you take us through the process of the corn harvest? So the video that, unfortunately we had some technology issues there, but our viewers will be able to watch that. So they'll see, the corn being harvested by the combine, transported into a grain bin, and then to a truck.
Right.
But when it arrives here at the farm, what happens with it here at the farm?
When it arrives here at the farm, hopefully there'll be a truck coming in here while we're still doing this, and so I can actually show you what happens. But when it comes in here, it gets dumped into the receiving pit over here, which we can walk over and take a look at that. Okay. What? Okay. Yeah, and I forgot to mention the corn gets weighed. It does get weighed so that we know how much is on each truckload, and then it gets dumped over here. We call this our receiving pit. It holds about 600 bushel. So we will dump it in here, and then this elevator takes it up and distributes it to the proper bin. We put it into what we call a wet bin. That's where all the wet corn goes and is held there until it goes into the dryer, which it goes back into the elevator and goes up into the dryer. You can hear the dryer probably in the background. That is burning propane, and it's heated to 180 degrees, and I'll show you the controls for the dryer. these are the dryer controls, and this is our moisture. We have a moisture meter in the drying chamber. So right now that the moisture is at 18.6%, and there just dropped to 18.5, and it'll keep dropping until it goes to 17%. At 17, I have it set so that it will drop. It'll drop some corn out of the top. It's all dried at the top of the bin. It'll drop maybe 100 bushel of 17% corn. That goes to the bottom of the dryer bin, and this whole time there's air, keeps cooling it, and that's sort of the process. It just keeps continuing to work all day long, all night long, and I can change the moisture if I want to, if it's over drying or not drying enough. So I have the target set at 18. I mean at 17 now, and you can just see it dropped to 18.4. So okay, there's a truck coming in. Well, so that'll work out very nice, and we'll show you exactly how this process works. So the truck's coming in the driveway, and he'll pull up and then back up here, and we'll unload the back hopper back here, and then we'll unload the front hopper in the front pit, so that we can get him out of here. That this whole system is sort of like a race, and so when he comes in here, it's like a pit stop. The sooner we can get him unloaded and get him back to the field to keep that combine going, because the combine keeps harvesting, and the combine has we call it a grain cart out in the field that he will unload into this grain cart with just a holding bin until the truck gets back, and then the grain cart will unload into the truck.
So Jeff, how many trucks do you get through in a day in terms of harvesting?
Now it depends on the day. Probably anywhere from 15 to 20 trucks a day. Yeah, and so this is the first one of the day, because we just got started here a little bit ago. We usually start around 7:38 in the morning. Now later today we'll be switching over to soybeans, because with this nice dry weather, it'll be good for soybean harvest. Corn we can harvest anytime. We want to stand back here a little bit, because that truck will come back. We'll come back in here. He's being cautious because he knows we're back here, which that's very good. That's
So how many trucks do you have running at any one point in time?
3.
3?
Yeah, we have 2 running this morning because we're fairly close, but once we go further away, then we have 3 running. And this is called a hopper bottom truck. It's there's hoppers underneath it that we crank over. We have 2 of them, and then the other truck is a dump trailer, which actually dumps it. So there's 2 different types of trucks, and I had to signal him because he was going to take the other truck, and because I'm wired up here, we'll let him unload this one. Jesse, tell him to unload the front hopper in the other drag. And I'm going to turn the receiving pit on. You can watch me do that. And that starts feeding the corn into the elevator and takes it up into the dryer. I didn't give a real good explanation on how the corn is, how the combine harvests the corn. There's a big cylinder in the combine that sort of rubs it. When you saw me hand shelling earlier, we had to do all that by hand, but there's a big cylinder and concave that it's actually corn rubbing against corn that actually shells it off the cob. And then there's screens that sift out the cob from the corn. You can see how clean the corn is. There's a little bit of cob material there, but not very much. I think we'll get out of his way here. Because he needs to move it to get to the next hopper then. But yeah, the video of the combine running will be very interesting because the corn head actually pulls the stalk down and pops the ear off, and then the ear goes into the combine where all the thrashing takes place. And then the kernels get stored in a bin that holds up to 400 bushel at the top of the combine while the combine moves through the field. So then periodically the combine has to empty into the grain cart or the truck. So that's what's happening out in the field as he unloads here. Oh, and with the residue, the residue that comes out the back of the combine then gets spread. It gets spread evenly. That's an important part of the process for next year's planting, because if the residue was just dumped straight in back of the combine, we'd have to plant through that mat. Instead of that, it gets spread evenly and it makes it a lot easier to plant through. Let's go out here and watch him unload the front hopper. So Jesse, how's it going out there in the field today? It's going pretty good? Yep. Okay. Good. Do you want to grab a sample? Then we'll see what the moisture is. So the corn we hand shelled in there was 25%. So we'll see how close it is coming out of the combine. So the dryer is located at the top of that bin. You can see a little bit of steam coming out of the top of it. All the drying is taking place at the top of that bin, and then as it dries, it lets corn down to the bottom of the bin, and when that bin gets full, then we run it across this conveyor and into another elevator, and then it gets distributed to the proper bin. So what was it? 27. Okay, so it's a little higher than what we, and that depends on what part of the field did that come from? Okay, so that was a little bit lower part of the field, and so that makes the difference too. Is that around here none of our ground is flat, and so the flatter ground is going to be wetter than than the hills and the knobs will be. So we need to talk a little bit more about the residue and what we do after harvest. So let's go up here and do you have any more questions, Jeff?
So the grain comes here.
Yeah.
How long do you store
Okay.
it here?
Okay.
And then
That's
where does it go?
that's a good question. The grain gets stored here. We deliver pretty much year round to the mills. And when I say the mills, predominantly Wenger's is our biggest customer. There are other mills that we go to in the Mount Joy area. So we're very fortunate in this area that we do not have to take our grain far. I mean, that's one of the beauties of Lancaster County is that we have all this productive soil and our markets are close and our machinery dealers are close. I mean, all the infrastructure that, you know, most people don't realize how much of a blessing we have here in this county. So the corn is stored here up to, I still have some corn from last year yet that we're just about out of. And then that'll be gone this week. And then we can start filling that bin. So we basically deliver year round.
Does it ever go bad? I mean, sitting in a grain bin?
Hopefully not. That's part of my job to manage that grain. The key to it not going bad is plenty of air. And you see the fans located on the sides of the bins here. You need to have plenty of air on it. And then once it's dried to the proper moisture, once it gets to 15.5, it will keep a year. Now, the longer we keep it, we'll probably knock the moisture down to 14.5 just for that extra assurance. So if it's conditioned right and dried properly, it will keep. There was one year that it was the end of the season and I left some wetter corn at the top of in the dryer and I thought, well, that'll dry naturally. It didn't. And so that was my fault for not drying it when it came in. So that part of the key is drying it and having it at the right moisture.
Hard learning lesson.
That's a hard learning lesson. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's walk out in the field here.
Okay. Well, I said a little bit earlier about the importance of residue management and spreading the residue. And you'll be able to see here in the field, this was harvested 2 weeks ago. And the residue is fairly even across the field. It's a little heavier where the rows were, but this will make a nice mat for us to plant into next spring. Now, the other process I haven't mentioned yet is that if we do not plant wheat or barley or a good small grain after the corn, we will plant cover crop. And that's what we did in this field. And if you look closely here, you'll be able to see down here, you can see the little shoot coming up there. That's the cover crop coming up. It's just starting to emerge. So it's a little hard to see right now, but it's starting to come up. And so this field will get green with the cover crop. And the beauty of that is the cover crop sucks up any excess nutrients that are here instead of them leaching down. And we found that it's a real important process for the no-till and soil health. When we first started no-tilling is good, but the cover crops have added like a whole nother benefit to the soil health and no-tilling because the roots go down in and they're just like fibers. We can we can walk on this soil, and it 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 has some firmness to it, but yet it's still somewhat soft, and that's why us no-tillers do not like tillage, because we let the roots and the earthworms do our tillage for us. And another reason we don't like tillage is that you can almost see a little bare ground here every now and then, not very much. But if this was tilled, you'd see a lot more tilled ground. And the beauty of the residue and the cover crops is that when that rain hits, the rain is hitting not the soil but the cover. And when rain hits bare soil, it's almost like a little bomb, or like like a little BB hitting it, and that's what actually erodes the soil. So the cover really helps. I brought a shovel out here. I thought maybe we could dig up a little bit and see what it looks like underneath. So right there's see that's a kernel of probably a kernel of wheat that germinated, and that'll be the cover crop growing. We don't have it seeded real thick. We seed 50 pounds an acre of the cover crop. Look how the soil just comes apart. That's another reason why we don't like tillage, because see, right here's a worm, our friend the worm. It's not hard to find worms in here. The worms they're out here 24 hours a day, turning this residue into humus and into organic material. That's what builds healthy soil, is the activity out here from everything that's going on. We also use a lot of manure from our pigs, and the manure is also, it's a surface spread. On top of this, the manure helps break down this residue, and then the cover crop will capture the nutrients from the manure. We like to surface spread it. I know some of our neighbors might not be happy with us when we surface spread because of the odor, but I think most people in Lancaster County by now are pretty much familiar with that smell. And but we like to surface spread versus injection, just because the injection causes tillage, and so we feel like we're actually being more environmentally responsible by not tilling the soil.
And I know cover crops and no-till, has been around for a long period of time. But over your years of farming, how have you seen the adoption of no-till and cover crops being implemented across the county?
It was a slow start, like a lot of things are. But the no-till has caught on. There, I would say probably 75% of the land is no-tilled in Lancaster County. There are a few crops like tobacco and vegetables where it's difficult to no-till, although there are some no-till planters doing that now also. The cover crops really haven't become mainstream until maybe 10 years ago. And the reason that the cover crops are a little harder sell than the no-till, the no-till saves on trips over the field, and it saves on expenses because you don't have to till the soil. The cover crops actually take some time to put in. It's another trip. We had to make another pass across the field, and I saved some seed for my cover crop, but I also bought some additional seed to have a four-way mix here. My mix was wheat and barley and canola and triticale. I had to buy the triticale and the canola. So I had out-of-pocket money for that, and I had to make the extra trip. So some farmers look at that as like, well, I don't want to put out the expense and the time it takes until they actually do it and see the results and see that it it builds the soil health over time. You may not see an immediate benefit, but each year gets better and the soil gets healthier.
And what is that? So the soil gets healthier. What does that mean for the plant? And what does that mean for your management?
Well, what that means, that the soil being healthier, is that the there's more nutrients readily available to next year's crop. The soil's is structured so that the roots can go through it so much easier than it used. We used to think that, well, we had to till the soil, we had to beat the soil into submission. Yeah, and so the more times you beat that soil and pulverized it, it look it be it looks loose when you till it, but you've destroyed all this infrastructure, and so then after a few rains, it actually becomes hard. So soil health, it covers quite a few things. It covers the biology, and it covers the soil texture and the nutrient availability. So it's sort of a word that encompasses a lot of different things.
So not only a farmer, you have to be a biologist too.
Well, to a certain degree, to a certain degree you do.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Another thing that we're going to do with some of the residue on the other side of the lane, um, we're actually gonna harvest that the corn stover, where we've been trying to get it dry enough. The last 2 weeks have not been conducive to drying. And so you'll see some farmers out there baling up the corn fodder, and that's used for bedding. And so on the field south of the lane here, we're going to bale that, and I'll probably sell it for bedding because we don't need it for our pigs. But the advantage to that is we're removing the residue off of those fields, and it'll be a little easier to get our drill in to plant the wheat. So that you will see some farmers removing the residue, and that's why. But then it's important to get that cover crop back in there,
Right.
because then all this residue is gone, and so you need to immediately plant something else to get it growing, so that there's something there to catch that water.
And what's your typical, drop dead date of when you need to have that cover crop in so that it can get established?
Christmas,
Christmas?
because I don't like to miss Christmas dinner. So some people will say that Thanksgiving is the cutoff date, and some people, I tend to go later, just because that anything planted in December, you will not see it. Obviously, it's cold then. But you'll see it in the spring, and that's another benefit of the late cover crops, because we have some beans out that were double crop beans. They were planted after wheat, weren't planted until July. They won't be harvested until just around Thanksgiving. And so we can't plant cover crop until then. And so some people will say, well, it's too late to plant it. It's not, because you will still get benefit out of that in the spring. And even though there's no growth there in the fall, there's some residue from the wheat and barley stubble, and so that soil isn't as bare as what truly bare soil would be.
Sure, sure. And then in the spring, what do you do with the cover crop? Do you harvest that, or I know, some movement is planting green where it gets rolled down and you plant right into it. What's your
Right.
method that you?
Well, my
use?
method, some people do harvest their cover crop, especially if they have a dairy farm and need the forage. I don't need the forage. My pigs don't eat forage. So I plant green. Planting green, we should define planting green. Planting green is when you plant into a living cover crop and you kill it later. And killing it. I kill it with herbicide. There are some farmers that are rolling it down. I don't have a roller, and I'm not planting any rye, so my cover crop doesn't get quite that big. I'm using the wheat and triticale because I don't have a roller. I don't want it getting that big. But there are some farmers doing that and been very successful with that. I just haven't gotten to that point yet. And so you'll have different levels of, everybody has a different management practice.
Sure.
But the planting green has worked very well because, especially for the late planting cover crop, that cover crop that comes up late isn't very big in the spring. So we plant into it green. It might only be like that, and we can wait 10 days before the corn comes up, and in that time it can almost double in height. And then we come in and spray it, so we get that much more growth out of the plant. And the other advantage we've seen is I'm using I don't use insecticide anymore. I used to use insecticide on my corn as mostly as an insurance policy. Insecticide is fairly cheap, so why not put it in? But we found with the planting green and the growing crop out there that the slugs and some of the other insects will actually go after the green cover crop and leave our newly emerged corn plant alone. And so we're using a lot less insecticide than we did years ago. That's a tremendous benefit, and that's a benefit that we didn't realize would occur.
Sure. Sure.
That's been very helpful.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I think
Yeah.
we should probably see if we have any questions that came up. So I'm just gonna come in here.
Sue, do you want to add anything? Yeah.
I'm not seeing any questions that came through the chat box. So maybe we'll just go for a few minutes longer here.
Okay, that'd be great. Do you
So-
have any more questions?
Well, I obviously we talked on farmland preservation a little bit, and
Mhm.
you preserving your farm and serving as chairman of the Ag Preserve Board. What motivated you back in, I think you said, early 90s?
Well,
When you
yeah,
preserved?
that's when I preserved. I was a member of the Lancaster, the Friends of Ag Preservation before the trust ever got its official
Right.
name. So my concern was that there was so much rampant development and hopscotch development in the county, where back in those days there was not good planning, and so it's been very fulfilling to see over the years how especially our township officials and the Lancaster County Planning Commission has taken it as a priority to keep the development close to where there is already development. Because back when I first got involved, I mean, you could build houses anywhere, and that's what was happening. And you can still drive around the county and see those spots where you have these little developments and in the midst of farmland where there's no sewer water, no infrastructure, and that's what got me motivated, just to see it was out of control. I mean, we still have development and we need development. I mean, that's us preservationists, so to speak, are not against development. We're against development at the right place. We're for development at the right places, and we are certainly for preserving this beautiful soil. And like I said earlier, we often don't realize how blessed we are in this county. Uh, with the ag infrastructure, and that's what we have here.
Well, and I know from, talking with people outside of the county, and you probably experienced this, there's a lot of farmers outside of Lancaster County, even in Delaware or New Jersey, that travel to Lancaster County for their services or their
Oh,
needs
yes,
because of that infrastructure. And
right.
that's certainly you're glad that we have it. We're glad that we have it there, but there's even people outside of Lancaster County that appreciate the agricultural infrastructure that
Well,
we have here.
right, and it's amazing because the business that we have here, they serve surrounding counties and states, and so uh, there's other states that don't have what we have in this county, and so that's a real blessing that most people don't realize. I can also see why people want to move here because it is such a beautiful county, and we have everything here. We have the scenery, and we have the infrastructure, and so I can see why people want to move here. But that it's also why we need to have preservation as a top priority.
Yeah, with the county expecting a population increase of 120,000 people over the next 20 years, that's a lot of people to accommodate in places,
Right,
especially if we want to make sure we continue to protect our agricultural resources,
right.
to make sure that we have the beautiful scenery and the quality of life.
The beautiful scenery, the quality of life, and we need the farmland for environmental purposes. That most people don't realize how the farmland contributes to the saving of the bay. Oftentimes, I think farmers get criticized for polluting the bay, but we never get credit for the water infiltration that all this farmland does. If this was paved over, we'd have a lot bigger problem than what we have now.
Very true.
And so the farmers are a big part of helping to save the bay.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And getting back to the farmland preservation, I urge the commissioners to consider our funding for subsequent years, because I think the people are behind this program, and it's not just us. The Lancaster County's behind this, and it's so important.
Yeah, we've experienced in public opinion polls, upwards of 85+% of people support farmland preservation, think the county should be doing more. And I know for Lancaster Farmland Trust, we have a lot of supporters that are outside of Lancaster County, but understand the value of our agricultural lands here and how it contributes to the quality of life and how accessible it is to the markets and how critical that is moving forward in terms of getting food to people.
And they understand it because they come here to visit. They come here to visit, and then they go back, and this is a special place, and so that it's neat to see that people outside the county are interested in it. Because usually when you go and visit somewhere and you leave, you forget about it. Yeah, but they don't forget about Lancaster County.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
We're gonna check to see if we have any more questions here, and if we don't have any questions, we'll probably then look at sort of wrapping things up. Let's see. So one question is, Jeff, you indicated that you've eliminated using pesticides.
Correct.
A question is there any other sort of management strategies that you can do or you do to minimize the amount of herbicide application?
Well, yeah, just this residue, the residue and the cover cropping program, that intensity helps to hold down weeds. And so we don't have to use as high a rates of herbicide as we used to have to do. And that's one thing, or we do not produce organically here. There's some farmers that do, and that's okay, but they need to till the soil in order to do that. And they have a lot more weed pressure than what we do, because the tilling of the soil actually aggravates that. There can be weed seeds that lay dormant, and when you till the soil, it aggravates them. So just the fact of the no-till and the cover crop has allowed us to reduce our rates. So we still use herbicides, but we use less than what we used to do.
Sure. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's see, other questions here. So there's one question about, obviously you're harvesting corn here for grain.
Correct.
Other farmers are harvesting it for feed in terms, especially in dairy operations.
Correct.
So, you know, one question is, what's the difference between the two process there? You know, what are they utilizing that corn for, and how's that harvesting process different?
That's a good question. The farmers that are harvesting the whole plant, the dairy farmers harvest the whole plant. It's chopped into teeny little pieces, and it's greener than I was telling you earlier about the moisture being high. They want the moisture higher. They want it around 50 or 60% moisture, and it gets blown into a silo, and there it ferments. And so they want it to ferment. Whereas my grain, I'm just harvesting the grain, and everything else is called residue. And so I'm just keeping the grain and drying it to a safe storage where they're putting it in wet, and it's ensiled, which is why it's called silage. And so for a dairy farmer that harvests the whole plant, and he actually has bare soil there, that's even more important for him to get that cover crop in, because he doesn't have this residue left that we're so blessed with. That's a good question.
And probably has a little bit more time to get that cover crop in.
It has more time because the silage harvest is winding up now, because most of the silage has been cut, and because it's cut at an earlier stage.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. We're gonna look at, see if we have any more questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. So Jeff and Sue, thank you very much for agreeing to give up an hour of your time and show us around your farm and talk about, you know, your operation, the harvesting process, you know, some insight on soil health, which I know for a lot of people who tune into our webinars are really interested on water quality issues and soil health. And I think it's great, you know, from your perspective as someone who works the land day in and day out, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you know, your approaches and management strategies to make sure that you're doing your part related to protecting our environmental resources that we have here. So thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. It's been our pleasure, and it's certainly a pleasure to work out here in God's earth. You know, we didn't create this, the land, and you know, God did, and it's just a real privilege to be out here working and to be involved in the preservation movement.
Yep, got to be a good steward of what's provided to us.
Exactly. Yep. So thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So just as a reminder, we apologize again for the technology issues at the beginning. The video will be sent out and also will be on our website and our YouTube page. So I would encourage you to tune into that. I think you'll get some insight of what the action in the field actually looks like from behind the windshield of a combine. And until we have our next webinar, thank you for your support. Thank you for your interest. And we hope that you are safe and well. Have a great day, everyone.
Well, Jeff Frey is my uncle, so I more or less grew up around the farm. I started, probably the first time I ran this machine, I was 16 years old. Not necessarily this machine, but a combine similar to this. And but I have been working for him for the most part a couple years out of high school. So I've been working here close to 20 years. So I do a lot of managing as far as working on the machinery, helping to figure out the cropping systems, and I do a majority of the spraying. So managing the crops, taking care of the weeds, trying to keep the crops healthy to get us to this point where we can come in and see how good we did. We did the best that we could do up to this point, and it's pretty much in God's hands as far as what kind of crop we get out of this. And so yeah, it's every year is a different learning experience, and I've learned quite a bit over the years. I was very fortunate to grow up right next door, so I was spending my time around all the machinery, and yeah, it's nice to nice to have my own glass office here on a beautiful fall day. Well, this year we got dry in July and August, so the corn average is definitely lower than average. We're probably 20, 30, maybe 40 bushels lower than average on some of these fields. It's still good. I mean, in some parts of the state they're not even going to be getting a harvest because it was so dry. This grain will go to the feed mill and will go out for chicken home or dairy feed. We have two finishing barns back at the home farm that some of this corn may end up going back to that, but we do not directly grind anything for those animals because we're contracted. So the feed comes out of whatever feed company that the contract is signed up with. So the whole process of the crop of next year's crop starts right now. So the monitor that is right up here, I can look at this monitor and I can see exactly what this variety is and what it's yielding. And as I'm harvesting, I can see the ear size. And you're looking at the yield, but you also want to look at how healthy the stalk of the ear, the stalk in the corn, and just the whole plant. See how everything's holding up. If it's starting to have some high disease pressure, or if it's starting to fall down, it's something that we're not going to want to pick next year. Or maybe it might not be good for this field. We just have to say, okay, that's a good variety, but it will not work in this field. We have to pick a different variety for this field. So what we'll do is this is the time of year we pick varieties and figure out where we want to put stuff and kind of a projection or thinking ahead until next year. After this corn is taken off, we'll come in and we plant. It's important to have something growing, something live and growing in your soil all the time to feed the microbes and keep the soil alive and healthy, prevent runoff. And so we'll come in and plant a cover crop. This year it will be a 4-way mixture, and that cover crop will stay green all year long. It'll be a little dormant during the cold months, but it'll still be there, holding the soil in place, keeping things healthy. And then in the spring, we will come in. We'll just stick with the corn. In the spring, we'll come in and plant the corn through the green cover crop, and the cover crop will be killed the first time we come through with the sprayer. But when we come through with the corn planter, that's when we start about the middle of April to plant the corn. And when we go through and plant the corn, we give a little bit of starter fertilizer. If we have the opportunity, we will take some of that hog manure that I was talking about, the finishing barns over there, and we'll put the hog manure on the living cover crop before we plant anything in it. And that cover crop will suck in the manure and aid in keeping the nutrients there, and it won't run off. It'll stay there in the soil for when that corn plant needs it. So we'll give it a little bit of starter fertilizer when we plant it. If there's manure there, that'll be there for a little later of the season. And then as the plant grows, we just keep an eye on the plant and the weed pressure. Typically, the weed pressure isn't too bad if you have a good living cover crop there, because you have something growing there that you want to be growing there and not extra weeds. The microbes would be the little animals, more or less, is the best way to describe it, that are living in the soil that we're trying to keep healthy and feed all year long with that good cover crop. So if there's something green and growing there all year long, that'll feed those microbes, and the microbes is what keeps the soil alive and provides a healthy soil. So in a handful of soil, there's thousands and thousands of microbes. It's almost like I guess I could say we're feeding cattle. We're almost like we're feeding animals but we're not really feeding cattle directly with that, if I make any sense. Because we are feeding all these microbes all year long. So that's what keeps part of keeping our soil healthy, is to feed those guys and keep the soil covered. And everybody is concerned about cleaning the bag, keeping the bay clean water. So healthy soil, cover crops, all that stuff